So Jakop Dalunde, member of European Parliament, I'm glad to see you.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to be with you.
Great. We had a fantastic morning. We had researchers here and we had business, and we've been talking about they've been saying it's so important to speed up the transformation. When we talked about possibilities, most of them said there is a possibility right now because of the geopolitical crisis. We can see we have possibilities, but there is also a big need for cooperation. So you are our last speaker today, and you will help me to summarize this with my questions to you. So. Being in the parliament, and your perspective from there is very important for us. So we start out with, how can we mitigate the geopolitical risks and at the same time strengthen climate transformation by Nordic cooperation or in some other way of doing it?
I would like to stress that right now we are actually slowing down the transition. Just last week in the European Parliament, we had a vote on the next step in reforming the European emissions trading system that puts a price on the emissions of the energy sector and the energy sector and the industry sector. And it was very close that we took a vote that would actually scale down ambition below what the Commission proposed. And the reasoning for this is that those parts who want to slow down the transition say that it's because of the industry, that the industry cannot cope with the stress that the current economic situation puts on them, given the war in Ukraine, and therefore we are looking to slow down the transition. And the same thing is happening in very many member states, where governments all across Europe are putting in various forms of subsidies or reducing carbon taxes, slowing down the transition. And it's really imperative that we get help. I heard in the discussion that we are talking about what businesses need from politics, but truly it's also goes the other way around. We need help. We need help in telling another version of the actual reality. Actually, increasing climate ambition will reduce our dependency on Russia and will actually make the war in Ukraine stop earlier. And increasing climate ambition will increase our independence on fossil fuels and support a more prosperous Europe, creating more jobs. But we are day by day actually losing that battle. So I'm very worried from that point of view.
Earlier today, we had an interview with Vela-Pekka Tynkkynen, who is the professor in Russian environmental studies. And he said the decision last week is playing in Putin's hands. That's exactly what he wants to happen. Careful decisions, not taking the right decisions, is exactly what Russia wants. So, and you were saying the same thing, because we have heard of the possibilities that is really a lot of things happening right now, but at the same time we need to speed up with policy. And you also said that business need to say that they need to see this climate transformation, and I would say that's what we've been hearing today, and also from the Business Network arrangements is we are saying that all the time, that we can succeed with the climate transformation if we get the right policy. But the dance we're talking about between policy and business, I think that is so important. I just want to... One discussion we had this morning was about biofuels, and how can we have these Nordic perspectives on biofuels that is not going hand in hand with the Southern Europe. What is your perspective? How can the Nordics contribute with biofuels in Repower EU?
Well, generally speaking, European legislation regulates the sort of demand side of biofuels, while normally it is national legislation that governs the production side of biofuels, which means that in most member states, European legislation that incentivizes consumption of biofuels don't necessarily mean increased production of sustainable biofuels in those member states, but very likely means the import of unsustainable biofuels from other parts of the world. That's why I think it's very narrow-minded if we only focus about the European demand side. If we want to unlock the incentives for sustainable consumption of biofuels, we also need to do the homework in very many member states to ensure the production of sustainable biofuels. Because otherwise, it will be very difficult for me as a Scandinavian member of the European Parliament to convince my progressive colleagues in the Parliament of the merits of sustainable biofuels, because from their perspective, that very concept is greenwashing. So we have a lot of work to do, and that's not only PR work, it's also policy work in many member states to ensure the sustainable production of biofuels.
What an important perspective. Thank you for that. And go down to the Swedish context with how important is the reduction quota regime, reduktionsplikten, for the climate transformation and to reduce the dependence of Russian oil?
I would say it is extremely important, and what the current Swedish government is doing, breaking or putting a pause on the scaling up of the reduction scheme. I think it's very detrimental, and I think we are just putting ourselves in the corner, both in terms of making the green transition more expensive, because the less that we do on the consumption part of the fossil fuels, the more we need to do in other measures, which is likely more expensive. So the best thing the problem is that we're looking too much. The politics is looking too much on the symptoms and too little on the problems in the way that we are reducing carbon taxes, reducing the reduction scheme, because of very many voters might feel the sort of short-term pain. But the more that we do that, the more we are creating problems for ourselves in the future, and the more we are putting money in Putin's pockets, which will only it will require us to spend even more on defense. So in very many ways, this policy is quite expensive. We need to spend more on defense spending, and we will need to spend more money on adaptation to climate change in the future.
And we are standing here and have a lot of crises in front of us. We have the climate crisis. We talked about the food crisis before in one of the panels. We have the Ukraine. How do we handle all the crises that we stand? How can we succeed with climate transformation with all these crises?
I think that's really a big problem, given that the way that our public sphere is functioning, it seems that we can only handle one crisis at a time. Just last week in the European Parliament, we had a vote on ETS, which was reported that the proposal from the Environmental Committee was shut down. But in the very same vote, we actually voted on a quite ambitious reform of the way that aviation pays in the ETS, which is really ambitious, but nobody wrote about that because the amount of journalists that cover what we do is very limited, and they cannot afford to spend too much time actually understanding what we're voting on and how that works. So if we want to scale up the green transition, that's not only about what we do politically, it's also how the media functions, and we need to make sure that we pay for quality journalism that can accurately cover what is actually going on in our politics, in our societies.
Finally, is it anything in this geopolitical crisis and all this crisis that we have that makes you positive?
Well, there are some good things happening, like the vote that we had last week on banning internal combustion engine cars, sending a clear signal to the market that it's electric cars going forward. We had a very good vote on aviation, making sure that we are putting a much stronger carbon price on the emissions of aviation. So a lot of good things are happening, but at the same time, the political pressure on the green transition is weakening, and we need to make sure that when voters pick their party, that they also taking the green transition into account.
Thank you so much, Jakop Dalunde, that you could end this webinar together with us, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much, Jakop.
You too.
And I also want to thank you all that have been listening to this webinar. Thank you so much. And also I want to thank you all the speakers for a fantastic contribution. And I just want to wish you a great day today. Thank you and goodbye.